The Varanthi Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They were tall creatures with hard shells like insects, with many arms and eyes that glowed red in the dark. Their ships numbered in the millions. Their soldiers were countless. They had conquered over 2,000 different species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, and they believed with absolute certainty that this was their right. Their philosophy was simple. You served the Hive throne, or you died. There was no middle ground. There was no negotiation. Every species they encountered faced the same choice, and most chose to kneel rather than be destroyed. The Empress Eternal sat upon her throne of black crystal in the heart of their homeworld. She had lived for 600 years, kept alive by technology that her scientists had stolen from a dozen dead civilizations. She watched the galaxy through 1,000 spy networks, and she smiled with her mandibles when she saw new worlds to conquer. When her admirals brought news of the Orion Spur, she leaned forward with interest. This region of space had been ignored for centuries, considered too remote and too poor in resources to bother with. But now her scouts reported something unexpected. A new species had risen there. They called themselves humans. The Empress studied the reports carefully. The humans were strange creatures. They were soft, with no natural armor or weapons. They lived short lives, rarely more than 100 years. They had only discovered faster than light travel 3 centuries ago, which made them infants by galactic standards. But what truly confused the Varanthi was human politics. The humans had formed something called the United Terran Confederacy, and this confederacy had declared itself permanently neutral. They traded with everyone. They allied with no one. They welcomed all species to their stations and colonies, asking only that visitors leave their weapons and their wars at the door. Terran space is sovereign, their laws declared. All are welcome in peace. None shall wage war within our borders. The High Conclave, the ruling council of the Empire, found this hilarious. They gathered in their great chamber, 100 of the most powerful Varanthi in existence, and they laughed at the human ambassador who stood before them. You refuse to pay tribute? One counselor demanded. You refuse to kneel before the Empress? The human ambassador was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. She smiled politely and shook her head. We mean no disrespect to your empire. We simply wish to remain neutral. We have no interest in your wars or your conquests. We offer trade and friendship to all species equally. Friendship? Another counselor spat the word like poison. We do not want your friendship, human. We want your submission. Then I am afraid we cannot help you, the ambassador replied. She did not seem afraid. She did not seem angry. She simply stated a fact, the way someone might comment on the weather. The Confederacy's position is clear. We will not serve any empire. We will not fight in any wars. We ask only to be left in peace. The conclave sent her away with threats ringing in her ears. They would return, they promised. They would teach humanity the price of defiance. But as the council debated whether to crush the humans now or wait until they had finished their current campaigns, one member remained silent. He sat in the shadows at the far end of the chamber, his old shell scarred from 100 battles. His eyes dim with age but still sharp with intelligence. His name was General Voreth Keen, and he was the oldest living commander in the Empire's military. He had served the throne for 340 years. He had conquered more worlds than he could remember. He had seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations burn and new ones grow from the ashes, and something about the humans made him deeply uneasy. He watched the ambassador on the view screen as she left the chamber. She walked with her head held high, showing no fear despite the threats that had been made against her entire species. Her steps were calm and measured. Her face betrayed nothing. Voreth Keen had seen that walk before. He had seen those eyes before. Long ago, in a war that still haunted his dreams, he had faced a species that looked just like that. Calm, polite, asking only to be left alone. The Krethval had been peaceful once. They had been scientists and artists, builders and dreamers. They had welcomed the Varanthi with open arms, hoping for trade and cultural exchange. The Empire had laughed at them and invaded anyway. What followed was 60 years of the bloodiest fighting in Imperial history. The Krethval had not surrendered. They had not fled. They had fought with a fury that defied all logic and reason. They had burned their own worlds rather than let them fall to the enemy. They had developed weapons so terrible that even the Varanthi recoiled in horror. In the end, the Empire had won. They had exterminated the Krethval, to the last individual. wiping them from existence entirely. But victory had come at a terrible cost. 17 billion Varanthi soldiers had died. The Empire had needed a full century to recover, and the Krithval had been peaceful. They had no warrior tradition. They had no great fleets. They had simply been a species that wanted to be left alone, and when that choice was taken from them, they had become something else entirely. Now Vorath Keen watched the human ambassador, and he saw the same thing in her eyes. That quiet certainty, that absolute refusal to bend. But humans were different from the Krithval. Humans had been waging war on each other since before they discovered fire. Their history was written in blood, an endless cycle of conflict and violence that stretched back tens of thousands of years. They had warrior traditions, they had weapons, they had experience in destruction that few other species could match, and they were asking, politely, to be left alone. The other counselors saw human neutrality as weakness. They saw a young species too afraid to fight, hiding behind diplomacy and trade agreements. They saw easy prey. Vorath Keen saw something else. He saw a species that understood war better than anyone. A species that had chosen peace not because they could not fight, but because they knew the true cost of fighting. He saw a leash, held tight by creatures who knew exactly what would happen if they let it go. He said nothing during the council meeting. He watched and listened as his fellow Varanthi made plans and boasted about how easily humanity would fall. He heard them mock the soft, short-lived creatures who thought they could stand apart from galactic politics, and when the meeting ended, he returned to his quarters and sat alone in the darkness for a long time. The Empire would not listen to him. He knew that. They were too proud, too certain of their own power. They had conquered 2,000 species, and they believed they could conquer 2,000 more. But Vorath Keen was old enough to remember the Krithval. He remembered the burning worlds and the endless dead. He remembered learning, too late, that some species should simply be left alone. He looked out his window at the stars, wondering which of those distant lights marked human space. Somewhere out there, a species of short-lived, soft-skinned creatures was going about its business, trading and building and living in peace. For now, the general closed his eyes and felt the weight of centuries pressing down on him. He knew what was coming. He could see the future as clearly as if it had already happened. The Empire would push, and push, and push, until humanity had no choice but to push back. And then the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of. He only hoped that someone would survive to remember the lesson. General Vorath Keen stood before the gates of the Imperial Palace and felt the weight of what he was about to do. He had not requested a private audience with the Empress Eternal in over 40 cycles. Such requests were rare, reserved for matters of the highest importance. The guards at the gate studied him with suspicion, even though his name was legend throughout the Empire. He waited in silence as they verified his identity and sent word to the throne room. The palace rose above him like a mountain of black stone, its towers reaching toward the dark sky. Somewhere inside, the Empress sat and watched and waited, spinning her webs of power across 1,000 worlds. The summons came within the hour. The Empress would see him. Vorath Keen walked through corridors that he had not visited in decades. The walls were lined with trophies from conquered worlds, artifacts and weapons taken from species that no longer existed. He passed statues of great generals, admirals, and conquerors, their stone faces frozen in expressions of triumph. His own statue stood among them, carved during the height of his fame. He did not look at it. The throne room was vast and cold, lit by pale lights that cast strange shadows across the floor. The Empress Eternal sat upon her throne of black crystal, her ancient body supported by machines that hummed and clicked in the darkness. Her eyes, dozens of them arranged across her face, tracked his approach with cold interest. Vorath Keen prostrated himself before her, pressing his head to the ground in the traditional gesture of submission. "Rise, General," the Empress commanded. Her voice was dry and hollow, filtered through speakers that made it sound like wind through dead trees. "It has been many years since you sought my attention. What brings you to my throne?" Vorath Keen stood slowly, his old joints protesting the movement. He looked at the Empress, at the guards who stood ready to kill him at her command, at the advisors who watched from the shadows. He knew that what he was about to say might be the last words he ever spoke, but he had to try. "Divine Mother," he said, "I come to beg you. Do not attack the humans. Leave them to their neutrality. Let them remain in peace. The silence that followed was absolute. The guards shifted, their weapons rising slightly. The advisors whispered to each other in shocked voices. The Empress stared at him with all her many eyes, and for a long moment she said nothing. "You beg?" she finally asked. "You, who have never begged for anything in 3 centuries of service?" "I do, Divine Mother, because I have seen what happens when we ignore warnings like this. I have seen the cost of pride." The Empress leaned forward on her throne. "Explain yourself, General. Tell me why I should fear a species of soft, short-lived creatures who hide behind treaties and trade agreements." Vorath Keen took a deep breath. This was his only chance. 340 cycles ago, he began. I was a young commander, leading my first campaign. The target was a species called the Krethval. They lived in a small cluster of systems near the galactic core. They were peaceful. They had no military to speak of. They spent their time studying the stars and creating art. He paused, remembering those distant days. The memories were still sharp, still painful. When we first contacted them, they welcomed us. They offered trade and cultural exchange. They thought we wanted to be friends. He laughed bitterly. We laughed at them. Divine Mother, we thought they were fools. We invaded their worlds and expected them to surrender within a week. "I remember the Krethval," the Empress said slowly. "They were exterminated. A successful campaign. A successful campaign?" Vorath Keen's voice rose despite himself. "Divine Mother, that war lasted 60 years. 60 years of constant fighting, constant death, constant horror. The Krethval did not surrender. They did not flee. When we took their worlds, they destroyed them rather than let us have them. When we killed their soldiers, their civilians took up weapons. When we thought we had won, they would appear again, striking from shadows, killing our soldiers in their sleep." He began to pace, caught up in the memories that had haunted him for centuries. They developed weapons we had never seen before, plagues that targeted our biology, bombs that could destroy entire moons, poisons that drove our soldiers mad. They fought with no honor, no rules, no mercy. They turned every victory into a defeat, every conquered world into a death trap. The Empress watched him with growing interest. "And yet we won. Yes, Divine Mother, we won. We killed every last one of them, hunted them across the galaxy until not a single Krethval remained alive. But the cost," he shook his head. 17 billion soldiers died in that war. Entire fleets were destroyed. Worlds we had held for centuries were lost. The Empire needed 100 years to recover its strength. He turned to face the throne directly. The Krethval were a peaceful species with no warrior tradition. They had no armies, no experience in war. They simply wanted to be left alone, and when we refused to leave them alone, they became something else entirely. They became monsters, Divine Mother, monsters of our own creation. "And you believe the humans are similar?" the Empress asked. "I believe the humans are worse." Vorath Keen stepped closer to the throne, ignoring the guards who tensed at his movement. "The Krethval were peaceful before we attacked them. They learned war because we gave them no choice. But humans? Humans have been waging war on each other since before they discovered fire. Their entire history is a story of conflict, of violence, of destruction. They have spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other." He spread his arms wide. "And yet, despite all that, they have chosen peace. They have chosen neutrality. They welcome all species to their space and ask only to be left alone. Do you not see what that means, Divine Mother?" The Empress was silent. "It means they understand war," Vorath Keen continued. "It means they know the true cost of fighting. They are not neutral because they are afraid. They are neutral because they know what will happen if they are not. They are holding themselves back, Divine Mother. They are choosing, every single day, not to unleash what they are capable of." He knelt before the throne once more. "The humans are giving us a chance to walk away. They are showing us mercy that we do not deserve. I am begging you, Divine Mother, please take that chance. Leave them alone. Let them keep their neutrality. Because if we push them too far, if we force them to fight," he looked up at the Empress with eyes that had seen too much death. "If we force them to fight, I do not think we will survive it." The throne room was silent for a long time. The Empress sat motionless, her many eyes fixed on the old general who knelt before her. The advisors held their breath, waiting for her response. Finally, she spoke. You have served the Empire well, Voreth Keen. Your victories are legend. Your loyalty has never been questioned. She paused. But I think age has made you fearful. The humans are young and weak. They have no allies, no great fleets, no history of galactic war. They are not the Krethval. They are merely children playing at diplomacy. Divine Mother, please. Enough. The word cut through the air like a blade. The invasion plans will proceed. We will teach these humans the price of defiance, as we have taught 1,000 species before them. Your concerns are noted, General, but they are unfounded. Voreth Keen closed his eyes. He had known this would happen. He had known they would not listen. You are dismissed, the Empress said. Return to your retirement and leave matters of war to those who still have the stomach for it. The old general rose slowly to his feet. He looked at the Empress one last time, at the ancient creature who had ruled the galaxy for 6 centuries and learned nothing in all that time. I pray you are right, Divine Mother, he said quietly. I pray that I am simply an old fool, frightened by shadows and memories, but I do not think I am. He turned and walked out of the throne room. Passing the guards and advisors who watched him with contempt, he walked back through the corridors of trophies and statues, past the reminders of all the species the Empire had destroyed. When he reached his quarters, he sat down at his desk and began to write. His resignation from all military duties, his final testament, his warnings for whoever might survive what was coming. The Empire would not listen to him. They never did. And somewhere in the stars, humanity continued to wait. The refugee flotilla had been running for 3 months. 3 million souls crowded into ships that were never meant to hold so many. Families huddled together in cargo holds. Children cried in the darkness. The elderly and the sick lay in corridors, tended by doctors who had run out of medicine weeks ago. They were the survivors of Keith 7, a small world that had made the mistake of resisting the Varanthi Empire. The Empire had responded by burning their cities from orbit, poisoning their water, and hunting the survivors across the surface like animals. Only those who reached the evacuation ships had escaped. Now they drifted through space, searching for somewhere, anywhere, that would take them in. Most species turned them away. The Varanthi Empire was too powerful, too dangerous. No one wanted to anger the Hive throne by sheltering its enemies. Station after station refused them. World after world sent them on their way with apologies and closed doors. Then they reached the border of Terran space. The human response was immediate. A patrol ship intercepted them within hours, and the captain's face appeared on their view screens. She was a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Terran Border Patrol, she said. We've received your distress signal. You're safe now. We're going to escort you to Haven Station, where our medical teams are already preparing to receive you. Is there anything you need immediately? Food? Water? Medical supplies? The Keth refugees stared at their screens in disbelief. They had expected to be turned away again. They had prepared speeches, arguments, pleas. Instead, the humans simply asked what they needed. You would take us in? The flotilla's leader asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Even knowing what the Empire might do? Commander Chen's expression did not change. Terran space is open to all who come in peace. The Empire has no authority here. You're under our protection now. She was true to her word. The flotilla was guided to a small moon called Haven 7, where Terran aid workers had already begun setting up temporary shelters. Food was distributed. Doctors treated the sick and injured. Children were given toys and blankets. And for the first time in months, the refugees slept without fear. A single Terran frigate remained in orbit, keeping watch over the moon. The TCS Shepherd's Watch was not a warship. It was a peacekeeping vessel, designed for rescue missions and humanitarian aid. Its crew of 47 was composed of volunteers who had chosen to spend their lives helping others. Commander Diana Okafor sat in the captain's chair and watched the refugee settlement through her viewport. Temporary buildings were spreading across the moon's surface. Lights were appearing in the darkness. Life was returning to people who had lost everything. She smiled. This was why she had joined the service. Far away, in the heart of the Varanthi Empire, the High Conclave was meeting once again. The news of the refugee flotilla had reached them, and they were not pleased. The survivors of Keth 7 should have died in the void. A final message to any who might think of resisting imperial rule. Instead, they had found shelter with the humans. This could not be allowed to stand. Admiral Skethral, commander of the Varanthi Third Fleet, stood before the conclave, and listened to his orders. He was a young officer, eager to prove himself, hungry for glory. When the counselors told him what they wanted, he smiled with all four of his mandibles. "You want me to pursue the refugees into Terran space?" he asked. "Is that wise?" The humans might object. "The humans are neutral," a senior counselor replied. "They do not fight. They will send protests and strongly worded messages. Perhaps they will refuse to trade with us for a few years, but they will not risk war over a handful of refugees. And their ship? The one guarding the moon? Destroy it if necessary. A single frigate is nothing. The humans will mourn their dead and do nothing else. They always do nothing else." Admiral Skethral bowed. "It will be done." The Third Fleet departed within the day. 50 warships, bristling with weapons, their crews eager for blood. They crossed into Terran space on a quiet morning, their sensors scanning for any sign of resistance. There was none. The border was undefended. No patrol ships came to intercept them. No warnings were broadcast. The humans apparently did not even know they were coming. Skethral found this amusing. The humans were even more foolish than he had thought. They found the refugee flotilla easily. The survivors of Keth 7 had gathered on Haven 7, building their temporary homes under the protection of a single small ship. The Shepherd's Watch detected the Varanthi fleet on approach, and immediately sent a distress signal. Then Commander Okafor opened communications. "Varanthi vessels. This is Commander Diana Okafor of the TCS Shepherd's Watch. You have entered Terran sovereign space without authorization. Please state your intentions." Admiral Skethral appeared on her view screen. His compound eyes glittered with amusement. His mandibles clicked as he spoke. "Human, I am here to reclaim property that belongs to the Empire. The refugees on that moon are criminals and traitors. You will withdraw and allow us to carry out Imperial justice." Okafor's expression did not change. "Admiral, these people have been granted sanctuary by the Terran Confederacy. They are under our protection. I cannot allow you to harm them." "You cannot allow?" Skethral laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "You are one ship, human. I have 50. What exactly do you think you can do to stop me? I can ask you to leave, and if I refuse, then I will remain here and protect the people in my care." Skethral stared at her for a long moment. This small, soft creature, commanding a ship that his fleet could destroy in seconds, was actually refusing to move. She had to know she could not win. She had to know she would die. And yet she sat in her chair with that calm expression and told him she would not move. "You humans are strange creatures," he said finally. "Very well. I gave you a chance. Your blood is on your own hands." He cut the communication and gave the order to fire. The Shepherd's Watch was not built for combat. It had minimal shields, only light weapons, and a crew trained for rescue operations. Against the firepower of 50 Varanthi warships, it never stood a chance. Commander Diana Okafor died at her post, along with 46 other men and women who had volunteered to spend their lives helping strangers. The frigate broke apart in seconds, its wreckage scattering across Haven 7's orbit. But in those final seconds, before the ship was destroyed, a young ensign named Thomas Park completed one last task. He launched a small probe, barely larger than a person, aimed at the distant star called Sol. The probe contained recordings of everything that had happened. The Varanthi threats, the refusal to leave, the order to fire. The probe activated its drive and vanished into the void, burning toward Earth at maximum speed. Admiral Skethral did not notice. He was already turning his attention to the moon below. The massacre that followed lasted less than an hour. Varanthi soldiers descended on the refugee settlement, killing everyone they found. Men, women, children, the elderly, the sick. No one was spared. The temporary buildings were burned. The bodies were left where they fell. 3 million lives ended that morning, erased as casually as dust swept from a table. When it was done, Admiral Skethral sent his report to the High Conclave. Mission accomplished. The refugees had been eliminated. The human ship had been destroyed. He noted with some amusement that the humans had not even attempted to fight back. The Conclave received his report with satisfaction. They had proven their point. Human neutrality was weakness, just as they had always believed. But they did not know about the probe that was now racing toward Earth. They did not know that in less than 3 days, the Terran Confederacy would receive complete recordings of everything that had happened at Haven 7. They did not know that they had just made the worst mistake in the history of the galaxy. On Haven 7, the fires burned themselves out. The bodies of 3 million refugees lay still and cold beneath the stars. And somewhere in the wreckage of the Shepherd's Watch, a twisted piece of metal still bore the ship's motto, "To protect those who cannot protect themselves." Commander Diana Okafor and her crew had lived by those words. They had died by them too. And now, humanity would answer for their deaths. For 3 days, humanity said nothing. The probe from the Shepherd's Watch reached Earth and delivered its recordings to Terran High Command. Within hours, every government official, every military commander, and every citizen of the Confederacy had seen what happened at Haven 7. They watched Admiral Skethral mock Commander Okafor. They watched the Shepherd's Watch die in a storm of weapons fire. They watched 3 million refugees, people who had trusted humanity to protect them, be slaughtered like animals, and then they went silent. The Varanthi Empire waited for the expected response. They waited for the angry messages, the diplomatic protests, the threats of economic sanctions. They waited for humans to cry and wail and demand justice while doing nothing to achieve it. Instead, there was only silence. On the second day, the High Conclave began to grow uneasy. The humans had not contacted them at all. No ambassadors had requested meetings. No messages had been sent. The Terran border was closed. All traffic suspended, with no explanation given. Some counselors suggested that the humans were simply too shocked to respond. Others argued that they were probably having internal debates about what to do. A few even wondered if the humans had simply given up and accepted imperial dominance. General Vorathkin, watching from his retirement estate, knew better. He had seen this silence before. It was not the silence of defeat or confusion. It was the silence of a predator drawing breath before the strike. On the third day, the Varanthi received word that the Terran ambassador had requested an audience with the High Conclave. Finally, the counselors thought. The humans were ready to talk. They gathered in their great chamber, 100 of the most powerful Varanthi in existence, and waited for the human representative to appear. They expected a different ambassador this time. The last one had been old and tired. Surely the humans would send someone younger, someone more easily intimidated. The man who walked into the chamber was tall and gray-haired, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes were dark and empty, showing no fear, no anger, no emotion at all. He stood before the conclave as if he were standing before a group of children, not the rulers of the galaxy's greatest empire. "I am Ambassador Marcus Webb," he said. His voice was flat and cold. "I have been authorized to deliver a message from the United Terran Confederacy." "Speak, then," the Empress commanded. She sat on her throne above the chamber, watching with all her many eyes. "Tell us what your people want. Reparations, an apology. Name your price, human. We are feeling generous." Ambassador Webb did not smile. He did not react at all to her words. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, which projected an image into the air above his head. It was the face of Commander Diana Okafor, taken from her personnel file. "This woman was murdered 3 days ago," Webb said. "She and 46 others aboard the TCS Shepherd's Watch. They were peacekeepers, volunteers who dedicated their lives to helping those in need. They died protecting refugees who had sought sanctuary in Terran space." He pressed another button, and the image changed to show the faces of all 47 crew members, arranged in a grid. "These are their names, these are their faces. We will not forget them." "Is there a point to this display?" a counselor asked impatiently. "Yes." Webb's voice remained flat. "The United Terran Confederacy formally rescinds its doctrine of neutrality with respect to the Varanthi Empire. We are no longer neutral. We are no longer peaceful. We are at war." A murmur ran through the chamber. Several counselors laughed. "War? The humans were declaring war on the Empire? You are one species," the Empress said, her voice filled with amusement. "We have conquered 2,000. What do you hope to accomplish with this foolish declaration?" "We are not seeking to accomplish anything," Webb replied. "We are not fighting for territory, or resources, or political advantage. This is not a war of conquest." "Then what is it?" Webb looked up at the Empress, and for the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not hatred, something colder, something older. "This is a war of vengeance," he said quietly. "For 47 names we will not forget. For 3 million graves we will not forgive." The Empress laughed. "Vengeance? You are declaring war on the greatest power in the galaxy for vengeance. You are more foolish than I thought, human. Perhaps. Webb turned to face the entire conclave. But I think you are the foolish ones. You have spent 12,000 years conquering the weak. You have enslaved thousands of species. You have burned worlds and murdered billions. And in all that time, you have never once faced an enemy who truly wanted to destroy you. He stepped forward. Every species you conquered wanted to survive. They surrendered because they wanted to live. They submitted because they hoped to endure. You learned to exploit that desire, to break your enemies by offering them survival in exchange for obedience. His voice grew harder. But we are not fighting to survive. We are not fighting to conquer. We are fighting because 47 of our people died doing what was right, and you laughed about it. We are fighting because 3 million innocents trusted us to protect them, and we failed. We are fighting because you need to be stopped, and no one else is willing to do it. You will be destroyed, the Empress said, but some of the amusement had left her voice. Maybe, Webb agreed, but I do not think so. You see, humanity remained neutral because we understood what we are capable of. We chose peace because we knew the cost of war. We have spent 10,000 years fighting each other, learning every possible way to cause suffering and death. We are very, very good at it. He smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. You should have listened to your general. You should have left us alone. Vorath Keen? The Empress's voice was sharp. What do you know of him? We know that he tried to warn you. We know that you did not listen. We know that he is the only one of your leaders who truly understands what is coming. Webb shrugged. He will probably survive. The rest of you will not. He turned to leave. Wait, the Empress commanded. Where are you going? Webb paused at the door. I have delivered my message. There is nothing left to discuss. The war has already begun. Begun. We have seen no attacks. We have detected no fleets. You will. Webb glanced back over his shoulder. We are not alone, Empress. For 12,000 years you have made enemies of every species you conquered. Every subjugated world hates you. Every refugee fleet dreams of your destruction. They have been waiting, hiding, hoping for someone to stand against you. His smile widened. Today, 17 species declared war on the Varanthi Empire. Not because we asked them to. Not because we paid them. Because they saw what you did at Haven 7, and they decided that if humanity was willing to fight, they would fight too. The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors shouted questions and demands. The Empress rose from her throne, her many eyes blazing with fury. But Ambassador Webb was already gone. 12 hours later, the Terran 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Expeditionary Fleets translated into Varanthi border space. Behind them came the fleets of 17 subjugated species, ships that had been hidden for decades, waiting for this moment. The war had begun, and humanity, for the first time in its history, was united. Not in hope, not in ambition, not in greed. United in cold, methodical fury, ready to teach the galaxy what it meant to harm those under human protection. General Vorath Keen received news of the declaration in his retirement quarters. He read the reports, watched the recordings, and nodded slowly. He had tried to warn them. He had begged them to leave the humans alone. They had not listened. Now the Empire would learn the lesson he had learned 300 years ago. Fighting the Krethval. Some species should simply be left in peace. Because when you take that peace away from them, what remains is far worse than anything you could imagine. The humans had removed their leash, and the Varanthi Empire would never recover. The Varanthi Empire had conquered 2,000 species over 12,000 years. They had built the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. They had believed themselves invincible. Humanity and its coalition broke them in 18 months. It was not a war in any sense the Varanthi understood. They had expected great fleet battles, honor duels between admirals, the slow and steady advance of territory. That was how wars were fought. That was how they had always been fought. The humans did not care about how wars were supposed to be fought. They cared only about winning. The first strikes came without warning. Supply convoys exploded in the void, torn apart by mines that had been placed days earlier by ships that were never detected. Communication relays went silent across entire sectors, leaving Varanthi commanders blind and deaf. Breeding worlds found their atmospheric processors sabotaged, their populations choking on poison before help could arrive. The humans called it asymmetric warfare. The Varanthi called it cowardice. But it did not matter what anyone called it. It worked. Admiral Skethrol, the officer who had destroyed the Shepherd's Watch, was found dead in his quarters 3 months into the war. Someone had bypassed his security, entered his room, and killed him with a blade while he slept. The assassin left no trace, no evidence, nothing but a small photograph pinned to his chest. It was a picture of Commander Diana Okafor. The message was clear. Humanity remembered. Humanity was watching. And humanity would find everyone responsible for Haven 7, no matter how long it took. Fear spread through the Imperial military. Officers who had laughed at human neutrality now looked over their shoulders constantly. They posted guards. They moved in groups. It did not help. One by one, everyone connected to the Haven 7 massacre died, picked off by ghosts they never saw coming. The High Conclave demanded a counterattack. They ordered their fleets to strike Earth itself, to burn the human homeworld and end this war once and for all. The fleet that attacked Earth numbered over 1,000 ships. It was the largest armada the Empire had assembled in centuries, crewed by their finest soldiers, armed with their most devastating weapons. It was destroyed in 6 hours. Earth was not undefended. Earth had never been undefended. The humans had simply hidden their defenses, disguising weapons platforms as civilian stations, seeding the asteroid belt with automated kill drones, building shipyards in the shadow of outer planets that could produce warships faster than the Empire could destroy them. The Varanthi fleet emerged from hyperspace expecting to find a peaceful world, protected only by a handful of patrol ships. Instead, they found a fortress. The first wave of attackers was annihilated before they could even return fire. The second wave lasted slightly longer, perhaps 10 minutes, before they too were reduced to debris. The survivors of the third wave tried to retreat, but human ships cut off their escape routes and picked them apart one by one. Not a single Varanthi vessel survived. Not a single soldier made it home. General Varathkeen received the news in his retirement estate, watching the reports on his view screen with tired eyes. He felt no satisfaction. He had tried to warn them. He had begged them to leave the humans alone. They had not listened. Now the Empire was dying, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The coalition forces pushed deeper into Imperial space with each passing week. The 17 species that had joined humanity fought with a fury born of centuries of oppression. They liberated their own people from Varanthi slave camps. They destroyed shipyards and weapons factories. They toppled monuments to Imperial victory that had stood for thousands of years. And everywhere they went, the humans led the way. The Varanthi fought back, of course. They were not cowards. Whatever else they might be, they threw everything they had at the advancing enemy, mounting desperate defenses, launching suicide attacks, sacrificing millions of soldiers to slow the advance. It was not enough. The humans did not tire. They did not hesitate. They did not show mercy. Every Varanthi counterattack was met with overwhelming force. Every defensive line was broken. Every fortress was taken. In the final weeks, as Terran Marines fought their way toward the homeworld itself, the Empress Eternal summoned her remaining generals to the throne room. She demanded answers. She demanded solutions. She demanded to know how this had happened. How had a single, young species brought the greatest empire in galactic history to its knees? Her generals had no answers. They stood before her in silence, their shells scarred from battle, their eyes empty with defeat. Everything they knew about war, everything they had learned in 12,000 years of conquest, had been useless against the humans. One of the generals finally spoke. They do not fight like any enemy we have faced before. They do not seek territory or resources. They do not want to conquer us. They simply want to destroy us. Why? The Empress demanded. What did we do to deserve this hatred? You killed 47 of their peacekeepers. The general replied quietly. You murdered 3 million refugees under their protection, and you laughed about it. The Empress fell silent. The end came on a cold morning, when the sky above the Imperial homeworld filled with human ships. The Terran fleet descended through the atmosphere, burning past the last desperate defenders, landing troops in the streets of the capital itself. The fighting in the Hive Spire was brutal but brief. Marine units swept through the ancient corridors, clearing room after room, taking prisoners when possible, and killing when necessary. Within hours, they reached the throne room itself. The Empress Eternal sat on her throne as the doors were breached. She was surrounded by her last remaining guards, Ancient warriors who had served her for centuries. They died fighting, as they had always known they would. Then the humans entered, their weapons raised, their faces hidden behind helmets that showed nothing of what they felt. The Empress looked at them with all her many eyes. She had ruled the galaxy for 6 centuries. She had crushed 1,000 rebellions. She had thought herself immortal. Now she sat in her broken throne room, watching aliens in strange armor walk toward her, and she understood that her time was over. One of the Marines removed his helmet. He was young, with tired eyes and blood on his face. A fresh wound marked his cheek, still bleeding despite the medical patches applied to it. "Empress Eternal," he said, "you are under arrest for crimes against sentient life. You will be transported to Earth to face trial." "Crimes?" The Empress laughed weakly. "Everything I did for my people. Everything I built for the Empire." "You built your empire on the bodies of the innocent," the Marine replied. "You murdered billions. You enslaved thousands of species. You killed 47 of our peacekeepers and 3 million refugees who trusted us to protect them. They were nothing," the Empress spat. "Insects. Creatures not worth. They were people." The Marine's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Every single one of them was a person, with hopes and dreams and families who loved them. You treated them as nothing. And now you have lost everything." The Empress had no response. She sat in silence as the Marines surrounded her, as they bound her hands and led her from her throne. The palace that had stood for 12,000 years burned around them, and she walked through the flames as a prisoner. Outside, the capital was in chaos. Varanthi soldiers were surrendering in droves, throwing down their weapons and begging for mercy. Coalition forces were freeing slaves from camps that had held them for generations. Across the Empire, world after world was being liberated. The Empress was loaded onto a transport and taken to a Terran ship in orbit. She would face trial on Earth, along with the other leaders who had been captured. Some would be executed. Others would spend the rest of their lives in prison. None would ever hold power again. The war was over. General Varathkeen watched the final battle from his estate, far from the fighting. When the Empress was captured, he turned off his view screen and sat in the darkness for a long time. He had tried to warn them. He had begged them to leave the humans alone. They had not listened. Now the Empire was gone, and humanity had proven what he had always suspected. Their neutrality had never been weakness. It had been mercy. They had chosen peace because they knew the cost of war better than anyone. And when that choice was taken from them, when they were forced to fight, they had become exactly what he had feared, monsters that could not be stopped. In the weeks that followed, the coalition forces completed their work. The Varanthi military was dismantled. The conquered species were freed. The criminals responsible for centuries of oppression were brought to justice. And then, quietly, humanity went home. The Terran fleets withdrew from Imperial space. The coalition was dissolved. The United Terran Confederacy resumed its policy of neutrality, opening its borders once again to all who came in peace. But the galaxy was different now. Every species knew what humanity had done. Every empire understood what the humans were capable of. When Terran ships appeared in foreign ports, they were treated with respect. When humanity requested that conflicts stay out of their space, their requests were honored, without question. When human ambassadors spoke in galactic councils, their words carried weight that no other species could match, because everyone remembered Haven 7. Everyone remembered the 47 peacekeepers who died doing their duty. Everyone remembered the 3 million refugees who had trusted humanity to protect them. And everyone remembered what happened when that trust was betrayed. Humanity returned to its peaceful ways. They traded and built and explored and lived their short, bright lives in the light of their yellow sun. But the leash remained off. The galaxy had seen what lay beneath humanity's gentle surface, and it would never forget. Some species should be left in peace. Some creatures should not be pushed. Some warnings should be heeded. The Varanthi Empire had learned this lesson too late. No one else would make the same mistake.